Put a leaf of fresh cilantro in your mouth right now, and one of two completely different worlds will open up. For some of you, it will taste bright, green, citrusy, alive. And for others, it will taste like you just bit into a bar of soap. If you are in the soap group, you are not being picky, and you are not imagining it. You are smelling a real chemical that the cilantro lovers are partly blind to, and the reason is written into your DNA, in a gene that has been shaped by which foods your ancestors lived among for thousands of years. That soapy taste is not a flaw in your tongue. It is a message from your bloodline. Here is the thing that surprises people the most. The soap taste is really there. It is not a matter of opinion, and it is not that soap haters have a weaker palate. Cilantro naturally contains a family of chemical compounds, the very same kind of compounds that soap and lotion manufacturers use to make their products smell clean. Those compounds are genuinely present in the leaf, sitting right alongside the fresh green ones. So, the question is never whether the soapy chemical is in the cilantro. It always is. The real question is, which part of the plant your nose is built to notice first? And that is decided not by choice, not by culture alone, but by the receptors inside your nose, which were handed to you by your ancestors. Welcome to Health Exposed. Today we run a taste test on your own senses. One sprig of cilantro, and it reveals a piece of your ancestry hiding inside your nose. Let me show you the machine behind this, because it is stranger and more beautiful than people realize. You do not really taste most of your food with your tongue. You smell it. Almost everything you experience as flavor is actually your sense of smell, working from the back of your mouth as you chew. And your sense of smell runs on an enormous panel of tiny detectors called olfactory receptors, hundreds of different kinds, each one shaped to lock onto a specific type of molecule, like a keyboard with hundreds of separate keys. When you eat something, a whole chord of those keys is struck at once, and the combination is what your brain reads as a particular smell. Now here is the crucial part. The exact shape of each of those keys is written in your genes, and people do not all have identical keys. One person's version of a receptor can be tuned slightly differently from another's, so the same molecule presses their keyboard a little differently, and the same food plays a slightly different song. For cilantro, scientists zeroed in on one particular key. In a huge study of hundreds of thousands of people, researchers found that whether you taste cilantro as soap is strongly linked to a specific spot in your DNA, sitting right next to a cluster of these smell receptor genes, including one known as OR6A2. That receptor is especially good at detecting exactly the soapy compounds in cilantro. If you carry the version of that gene that makes this receptor sensitive, then when you eat cilantro, that soap key gets slammed down hard, and it drowns out the pleasant green notes. Your brain does not hear a fresh, citrusy chord. It hears soap, loud and clear, because your nose was built to shout that one note above the rest. The lovers are not tasting something better. They simply have a receptor that does not scream soap, so the gentle green flavors come through instead. Same leaf, same chemicals, two different keyboards, two different songs. So where did your particular keyboard come from? This is where it stops being a food quirk and becomes ancestry. Of all the genes in the human body, the smell receptor genes are among the most varied from person to person and from population to population. And that is not an accident. Your ancestors' noses were shaped by the world they lived in, the plants that grew around them, the foods they ate, the dangers they needed to smell coming, the ripeness they needed to judge, the spoilage they needed to avoid. Over thousands of years, different peoples in different places ended up with different mixes of these receptor versions, tuned to the smells that mattered where they lived. Your sense of smell is not just yours. It is an inheritance, a family heirloom passed down through countless generations of noses, each one keeping you alive by reading the chemistry of the world a little differently. And you can actually see this written across the map of human cuisine. In many of the great cooking traditions where cilantro is a beloved everyday staple, used by the handful, the soapy sensitivity tends to be less common. In some other populations, the soap taste is reported far more often. Part of that is surely familiarity, because a food you grew up eating every day becomes normal, and even beloved, and repeated exposure can genuinely soften how strong the soapy note feels over time. But part of it runs deeper than habit, down into which receptor versions your ancestors carried and passed to you. Your reaction to cilantro sits right at the meeting point of two great forces, the genes you inherited and the kitchen you grew up in. which is why this one little leaf is such a perfect probe. It tests both your bloodline and your upbringing at the same time. Here is something wonderful, though, and it is good news for the soap tasters. This is not a life sentence. Because so much of flavor is learned as well as inherited, many people who once recoiled from cilantro slowly come to enjoy it, especially if they eat it often or crush the leaves, which releases and burns off some of those soapy compounds and lets the green flavors rise. Your genes set the starting point, the first impression, the loudness of that soap key. But your brain can learn to hear the rest of the chord over time. Some of the most devoted cilantro lovers alive today started out firmly in the soap camp. Your ancestry deals the first hand. It does not always get the last word. There is something worth pausing on here, because it changes how you think about every meal you have ever eaten. If one small gene can make the exact same leaf taste like a garden to one person and a cleaning product to another, then stop and consider what that means for the whole world of flavor. You have always assumed that when you and a friend share a dish, you are tasting the same thing. You are not. Not exactly. Every food you eat is being filtered through your own private set of inherited receptors, your own ancestral keyboard, slightly different from every other person at the table. The coffee that tastes bitter to one person and rich to another, the herbs, the cheeses, the spices some people crave and others cannot stand. So much of it comes down to these tiny inherited differences in the machinery of smell. Cilantro is simply the most dramatic and famous example, the one where the split is so sharp and so obvious that it becomes soap versus citrus. But it is a window into a much bigger truth. You do not live in a shared world of taste. You live in your own, drawn for you by ancestors you never met. And that is why arguments about cilantro get so heated and so personal, when you think about it. When a soap taster insists it is disgusting, and a cilantro lover insists it is delicious, neither one is lying, and neither one is wrong. They are both reporting their world accurately. They are just standing on opposite sides of an ancient genetic line, each one certain that everyone else must be tasting what they taste. It is one of the clearest, most everyday reminders that the way you experience reality, right down to a leaf on your plate, is shaped by the specific people you descend from, and can be genuinely, measurably different from the person sitting right next to you. So think about what that tiny green leaf just did. With a single bite, it reached into your nose, pressed a set of keys whose shapes were carved by thousands of years of your ancestors' survival, and played you a song that half the world will never hear the same way. Whether you got soap or citrus, you were not tasting a preference. You were tasting a piece of your own inheritance, an ancient nose, still reading the world exactly the way it was built to, right there at your dinner table. Now settle the great debate in the comments, because this is what this channel was made for. Tell me below, does cilantro taste like fresh green citrus to you, or like a mouthful of soap? Where does your family come from, and did you grow up with cilantro on the table or almost never see it? And to the soap tasters, have you ever managed to come around to it? Post your verdict and your roots, and let us watch the ancient map of the world's noses draw itself, one sprig of cilantro at a time.